Every night, my wealthy son descended into the basement like he was guarding a tomb. I thought it was just wine or servers until 2 in the morning when I saw the truth. He was dragging a heavy, long box across the concrete. I froze in the shadows, realizing that if I was not careful, the body meant for that box was mine. Now there is no room for weakness. My name is Eleanor Harrow, though most people used to call me Ellie back when I had friends to call me anything at all. At 72 years old, you learn that life narrows down until it fits into the spare room of someone else's house. For me, that house belongs to my son, Marcus. It is a sprawling glass and steel fortress in the quiet suburbs of Denver. The kind of place that looks beautiful in architectural magazines, but feels cold against the skin. I moved here 3 months ago after a bad fall in my shower left me with a fractured hip and the sudden, humiliating realization that I could no longer live alone. I look at Marcus now, in his tailored suits and Italian leather shoes, and I try to find the boy I raised. I worked 2 jobs for 30 years to keep him fed. I scrubbed floors and waited tables until my back screamed. All so he would never have to know the panic of an empty refrigerator. I turned down 2 marriage proposals because I did not want a stepfather bringing instability into his life. My universe revolved around his future. I thought I was building a foundation for him so he could stand tall. Now I live in his foundation, and it feels more like a prison. This house is a marvel of modern technology, sterile and efficient. But the heart of the house, or perhaps its stomach, is the basement. It is not a normal storage space. It lies behind a heavy steel door, reinforced with a keypad and a biometric scanner. Marcus calls it the server room. He told me on my first day, "Mum, you absolutely cannot go down there. The cooling systems are sensitive, and the wiring is exposed. It is dangerous." He says the word mom like it is a line item on a spreadsheet he is trying to balance. He is polite, certainly. He asks if I have taken my medication. He pays for the best physical therapists. But there is a wall between us thicker than the steel door downstairs. And then there is Naomi Glass, his girlfriend. She floats through the rooms like a sleek, expensive cat, eyeing me with a mixture of boredom and mild irritation. To her, I am just an antique piece of furniture that clashes with the minimalist decor. Yesterday, I heard her whisper to him, "Marcus, how long is this arrangement going to last? It is stifling. I could handle the coldness. What keeps me awake is the routine. Every night, just before 12 o'clock. The house goes quiet. Then, I hear it. The heavy thud of his footsteps moving toward the hallway, the beep of the keypad, the mechanical hiss of the hydraulic lock disengaging. He goes down there every single night. He claims he is checking the security protocols for his financial technology startup, Northbridge Quant Systems. I tried to tell myself this is what wealthy men do. They protect their assets. But sometimes, before he descends, he stops. I have caught him looking at me when he thinks I am asleep in the armchair. It is not a look of concern. It is a measuring look. He looks at me the way a contractor looks at a load-bearing wall he wants to knock down, calculating the cost and the mess. Last week, I made the mistake of asking. We were in the kitchen, and the silence was suffocating. I asked him, "Marcus, surely a server room does not need manual checking every night? Is there something else down there?" He dropped his coffee spoon. The clatter was sharp against the granite counter. When he turned to me, his face was flushed. "It is industrial equipment. Mum, Do you have any idea how much voltage runs through those racks I go down there to make sure the house does not burn down while you sleep? Why do you have to pry into things that are too complex for you to understand? He took a breath, smoothing his tie, but his hands were shaking. I am sorry. Just stay away from the door. Since then, I have watched him more closely. I noticed a pattern. He gets phone calls late in the evening. He speaks in low, clipped tones, never using names. Immediately after these calls, he changes. He rolls up his sleeves. He puts on thick work gloves. He takes a heavy-duty flashlight. He stays down there for hours. Tonight is no different. I am lying on the sofa in the living room. The lights turned off, so I merge with the shadows. The digital clock on the oven reads 11:55 at night. I hear the click, the heavy, metallic thunk of the basement door sealing shut. The silence that follows is heavy and thick. I lie there in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, and I feel a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. It feels ridiculous to fear the boy whose scraped knees I used to bandage. But as I stare at the ceiling, I cannot shake the feeling that whatever is happening beneath the floorboards is not about business. It is about something that needs to be buried. The uneasiness began to solidify into genuine fear on a Tuesday afternoon. A large delivery truck rumbled up the driveway, blocking the view of the manicured lawn. The driver, a burly man with a thick neck, struggled to unload 3 large crates marked as industrial equipment. I watched from the living room window as he wiped sweat from his brow, clearly frustrated. When Marcus came out to sign for them, I opened the front door to see if I could offer the driver some water, but the man was already complaining. "Buddy, what do you have in here?" "Lead bricks," the driver asked, kicking one of the crates gently with his boot. "This is way heavier than the manifest says. I nearly threw my back out getting it off the lift." Marcus did not smile. He signed the digital pad with a sharp, aggressive scribble. "It is specialized cooling hardware. Just get it inside. Do not scratch the floors." He immediately signaled the 2 private security guards he employs. "Take these straight to the cargo elevator for the basement. Do not stop in the hallway." When I stepped out onto the porch, Marcus turned on me with startling speed. "Mum, go back inside. There is heavy lifting going on, and I cannot have you underfoot getting hurt." Later that day, I was alone in the kitchen making tea. The house was empty of staff, and Marcus was supposedly on a conference call in his study. But from the ventilation grate near the floor, I heard it. A sound from the basement. It was a slow, grinding noise, like something incredibly heavy being dragged across concrete. Scrape. Clang. Scrape. It lasted for 10 minutes. It was the sound of metal biting into stone, a dry, harsh noise that made the hair on my arms stand up. That evening, I sat in the living room watching the news, trying to drown out the memory of that sound. The television was close to the basement door. Naomi walked in, wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of red wine. She paused, looking at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. "Eleanor?" She sighed, swirling her wine. "It is almost midnight. You are always sitting here, staring at that door. It is unsettling." She took a sip, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You should go to bed. You need your rest at your age. Besides, let the men handle the technical side of things. Marcus hates it when you hover." I went to my room, but sleep refused to come. At 2 in the morning, thirst drove me out of bed. I walked softly down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the carpet. As I approached the top of the stairs that overlooked the foyer and the basement entrance, I saw movement. I pressed myself into the shadows of the linen closet doorframe. Marcus was there. He was wearing a dark t-shirt that was soaked through with sweat across the shoulder blades, and he had thick, yellow construction gloves on his hands. He looked exhausted, his chest heaving as if he had just run a marathon. But it was what he was doing that stopped my heart. He was unlocking the basement door, but he was not alone. Behind him, resting on the polished floor, was a long metal box. It was waist-high and silver, battered and scratched, sitting on heavy-duty caster wheels. It looked like a coffin made for machinery. The lid was sealed shut with layer upon layer of black duct tape, wrapped so tightly the box looked like a wound. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and I gripped the doorframe until my knuckles turned white. Marcus grabbed the handle on the front of the box and pulled. He had to lean his entire body weight backward to move it. The wheels squeaked, a high-pitched ree-ree sound that echoed in the silent house. As the box rolled past a patch of light from the street lamp outside, I saw a flaw in the packing job. A corner of the black tape had peeled back near the rim. Underneath, a layer of blue plastic tarp was visible, and pushing against that tarp, straining against the metal side, was a curve. It was soft and rounded. It looked exactly like the curve of a human shoulder. Marcus stopped abruptly right at the threshold of the open basement door. He let go of the handle and spun around, scanning the darkness of the hallway and the stairs. His eyes were wide, feral, hunting for witnesses. I stopped breathing. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that the shadows hid my nightgown. Please don't look up here. Please don't see me. After 5 seconds that felt like 5 years, I heard him grunt, "Damn paranoia." He whispered to himself, his voice shaking. He turned back, grabbed the handle, and with a grunt of exertion, he dragged the monstrosity over the threshold. The door hissed shut behind him, and the heavy lock engaged with a final, decisive clack. I fled back to my room, my legs trembling so hard I nearly collapsed. I pulled the duvet over my head, but my mind was spinning with horrific images. Was he hiding money, drugs? Or was that box a vessel for something that used to breathe? And then a colder thought struck me. Was he practicing? Was he testing the weight to see if he could drag me down there when the time came? The next morning, I forced myself to walk past that spot. The hallway was pristine. The scuff marks from the wheels were gone, buffed away completely. The metal box had vanished into the earth. But as I stood there, sniffing the air, I caught it. Faint, but undeniable. The sharp, stinging scent of industrial bleach and ammonia wafting up from the crack beneath the basement door. It was the smell of a hospital, or a slaughterhouse, that had been scrubbed clean. I looked at the framed photograph on the mahogany desk, staring at the face of a 6-year-old boy with gap-toothed laughter and eyes full of trust. I remembered how Marcus used to be afraid of the dark. He would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, his small hands gripping my nightgown as he whispered, "Don't worry, Mommy. I will take care of you forever." That boy was soft. That boy had a heart that beat for someone other than himself. I tried to reconcile that child with the man who now walked these halls, a man made of ice and calculation, a man who looked at family and saw only overhead costs. My hands trembled as I reached into the sleek metal wastebasket beside his desk. I had seen him crumple something up earlier in a fit of frustration. I smoothed out the ball of paper on my lap. It was a printout of an email chain from an insurance broker. The subject line read, Policy Approval Confirmation. My eyes scanned the dense text until they landed on the numbers. It was a life insurance policy taken out in my name. The coverage amount was $5 million. The sole beneficiary was Marcus Harrow. The date of activation was just 3 months ago, exactly 1 week after I moved in. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I began to dig through the drawers he usually kept locked. But in his haste this morning, he had left the bottom one slightly ajar. Inside, tucked under a file labeled Tax Returns. I found them. A medical power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. Both bore my signature. But as I traced the ink with my fingertip, I knew I had never signed these. The loops on the E were too wide. The slant was wrong. The dates corresponded to the 3 days I was heavily sedated in the hospital after my fall. He had forged my consent while I was unconscious, legally granting himself the power to pull the plug on my life support or liquidate my non-existent assets whenever he chose. A noise from the driveway startled me, and I quickly shoved the papers back. I needed to know more. I went to the garage, pretending to look for a gardening trowel. I deliberately dropped my spare set of keys near the large, locked industrial cabinet in the corner. As I knelt to retrieve them, I used the key I had secretly copied from his ring weeks ago. The lock clicked open. It was not gardening tools inside. It was a supply cache for a construction project that did not exist. I saw receipt after receipt for bags of quick-drying cement, gallons of industrial-strength corrosive cleaner, and large, airtight plastic storage bins. Tucked behind a jug of bleach was a black notebook. I opened it to a bookmarked page. It was Marcus's handwriting, but the words were the musings of a monster. Basement ambient temperature 55 degrees. Decomposition rate slowed, but odor containment higher. How long until soft tissue dissolves in lye? If main power grid fails, generator sustains ventilation for 48 hours max. I slammed the book shut, my stomach churning with bile. He was not just storing things. He was researching how to erase a human being, driven by a sudden, reckless adrenaline. I went back inside and approached the basement door. For the first time in weeks, the electronic lock was disengaged, likely left open for the delivery men earlier. I pushed it open just an inch. The air that drifted up was not the warm hum of servers. It was damp and chemical. I crept down 3 steps. Through the gap in the inner security door, I saw a new room had been framed out. The walls were draped in thick, translucent painter's plastic, floor to ceiling. The floor was stained with patches of wet cement. It looked like a kill room from a crime documentary. "Mom," the voice cracked like a whip. I spun around, nearly losing my footing. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, his face twisted in pure rage. "What do you think you are doing?" He screamed, his composure shattering. I told you never to go down there. It is unsafe. I heard a noise. I stammered, backing away. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "You have no respect for boundaries. Do you know what it costs to keep this house running, to keep you fed and comfortable? You are suffocating me with your curiosity." He shoved me toward the living room, his eyes wild. "Just stay upstairs. Stop acting like a child." He stormed off to his office, slamming the door. I stood there, rubbing my arm, tears stinging my eyes. But the horror was not done. As I passed the sunroom, I heard Naomi's voice drifting from the patio. She was laughing into her phone. "Oh, stop worrying, babe," she said, her voice dripping with casual malice. "The liquidity issue is temporary. Marcus has a plan. The big insurance payout will solve everything. Yes, 5 million. If everything goes smoothly, we will be in Cabo by spring. We just have to wait for nature, or gravity, to take its course." I retreated to my armchair in the darkening living room, clutching the photocopy of the insurance policy I had managed to pocket. The house was silent again, but the silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with intent. I looked at the paper, then at the basement door. The denial finally died in my chest. "My son is preparing to kill me," I whispered to the empty room, the words tasting like ash. "He is going to kill me right under my feet." I decided to test the waters the next morning. I sat across from Marcus at the massive granite kitchen island, watching him scroll through his tablet while he shoveled egg whites into his mouth. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. "Marcus," I said, gripping my coffee mug, "I saw something strange on your desk. An email about a life insurance policy. $5 million seems like a lot of money for a woman who just sits at home. Does it not? Do you really need that much?" Marcus stopped chewing. He did not look up immediately. He swiped a finger across his screen, then slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. There was no guilt in them, only a flat, terrifying pity. "Mom," he said, letting out a long, weary sigh. "We talked about this. You have been snooping again. I think your fall did more damage than the doctors realized. You are becoming paranoid." "I am not paranoid. Marcus, I saw the numbers." He chuckled, a dry sound that lacked any humor. "You saw standard estate planning documents. You are confusing reality with those crime dramas you watch. Honestly, I think it is time we scheduled a neurology appointment. You are forgetting things. You are imagining threats where there is only love. It is concerning." He stood up, walked over to me, and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, like a yoke. "In fact, to make things easier for you, I have prepared some paperwork. It just simplifies the medical decisions so you do not have to worry about the details." He slid a stack of papers across the counter. I looked down. They were expanded power of attorney forms, granting him total control over my assets and healthcare immediately. "Sign here," he said, offering me a pen. "It is for your own good." I looked at the pen, then at his expectant face. I knew if I signed, I was signing my own death warrant. I let my hand drop to the table and started to tremble, forcing my fingers to spasm uncontrollably. I cannot," I stammered, making my voice quaver. My hands, they are shaking so bad today. "Marcus, I cannot hold the pen. Maybe tomorrow." He stared at my hands, his jaw tightening. For a second, I thought he would force the pen into my fingers, but he just snatched the papers back. "Fine. Tomorrow. But we are getting this done." Later that afternoon, I heard Naomi whispering to him in the hallway. "She is becoming difficult. Marcus. She is starting to ask questions. Maybe we should just put her in that high-end facility in Boulder. Get her out of the house." "No," Marcus hissed back. "The policy has strict clauses about residence and accidental death in the home. If she moves, the premiums triple and the payout timeline resets. She stays here. I will handle her." I realized then that my presence in this house was essential to his plan. I was not a guest. I was inventory. Desperate. I went into the backyard. My neighbor, Ruth Delgado, was tending to her roses. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who had always been kind to me. I walked to the fence, my hands shaking for real this time. "Ruth," I whispered, "can I talk to you? Please." I told her everything. The box, the basement, the insurance. I expected her to back away, to look at me with that same pity Marcus used. Instead, her face grew dark and serious. "You are not crazy. Ellie," she said firmly. "My sister. Her son did something similar. He had her sign over her house before we even knew what was happening. You need protection. Real protection." She went into her house and came back with a business card. Marisol Vega. She is with the Everstone Legal Group. She saved what was left of my sister's life. Go to her. Today. I took an Uber while Marcus was at a meeting, telling the security guard I was going to the pharmacy. Marisol's office was small, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. But Marisol herself was a force of nature. She listened to me for an hour without interrupting. "This is textbook financial abuse," Marisol said, leaning forward. "And given what you saw in the basement, it is escalating to physical endangerment. But we cannot just go to the police with a hunch. Marcus is a wealthy, respected businessman. He will say you are senile, and without proof, they will believe him. So I just wait for him to kill me." I asked, my voice breaking. "No. We fight back," Marisol said. "We collect evidence. I want you to photograph everything in that basement if you can do it safely. Record him. Get him to say the words about the money or the burden. And right now, you are going to sign this." She slid a document toward me. It was a revocation of all previous powers of attorney and the appointment of Marisol as my legal guardian in case of incapacitation. "If he tries to claim you are incompetent, I will step in," she said. "He will not be able to make a single medical decision for you without going through me." I signed my name. The pen did not shake. I left her office as the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I was terrified of going back to that house, to the cold walls and the steel door. But as I clenched my purse, I felt something I had not felt in months. I was not just a terrified old woman anymore. I was a mother who had raised a predator, and I was the only one who knew how to take him apart. "You want a war?" "Marcus," I thought, as the car turned onto his street. "You have one." 2 days later, Marisol introduced me to Caleb Boone. He did not look like the private investigators in the movies. He was a heavy-set man with a thick beard and eyes that looked like they had seen too much of the world's ugliness. We met in a diner far from my neighborhood, the smell of grease and coffee hanging in the air. Caleb placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. It landed with a thud that felt like a judgment. "Mrs. Harrow." "I am going to be blunt," Caleb said, his voice a low rumble. "Your son is not just a bad seed. He is a drowning man, and drowning men will climb on top of anyone to get a breath of air." He opened the folder. Inside were charts, bank statements, and grainy photos. Caleb explained that Marcus's company, Northbridge Quant Systems, was a shell. There was no revolutionary algorithm. There were no high-yield returns. It was a high-tech Ponzi scheme. He was taking money from new investors to pay off the old ones, and the cycle was breaking down. He was millions of dollars in debt, and the walls were closing in. "He is desperate," Caleb said, tapping a red column on a spreadsheet. "He needs $5 million immediately to stop the major investors from going to the authorities." That is the exact amount of your life insurance policy." I felt a cold shiver run through me, despite the warmth of the diner. It was one thing to suspect it, but another to see the math laid out. My life was just a line item in his ledger to balance the books. "And the basement?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What is down there?" "It is not just servers for his company," Caleb replied. "The power draw is massive. We think he is running a data haven. He is mining cryptocurrency to hide assets. But worse, he is hosting a server for buying and selling stolen personal data. That is why the security is so tight. If anyone sees that setup, he goes to federal prison for 20 years. That is why he does not want you near it. It is also why he has access to industrial chemicals. He is already buying things from the dark web." Then Caleb slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was a printout of an encrypted email they had managed to intercept. It was from Marcus to an unnamed creditor. "Collateral is living and on site." The email read, "Liquidation event scheduled within 90 days. Payout guaranteed. Just give me more time." I stared at the words, living collateral, liquidation event. He was talking about his mother. He was talking about me. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I had wiped his tears. I had paid for his college. And to him, I was just a walking sack of money waiting to be cashed in. Marisol reached over and covered my hand with hers. Her grip was firm, grounding me. "Eleanor, listen to me. We are not going to let him win. I have already contacted the insurance company's fraud department. We have flagged the policy. If anything happens to you, an accident, a fall, a heart attack, they will freeze the payout and launch an immediate investigation. He does not know this. He thinks the money is waiting for him." She took a breath and looked me in the eyes. "But this is bigger than insurance fraud now. I have spoken to a contact at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They handle financial crimes. They are very interested in what is in your basement." She slid a small white business card across the table. It bore the seal of the Department of Justice. "They want to catch him," Marisol said softly. "But to build a case that sticks, to prove intent for murder and the financial crimes, they need him to believe he is safe. They need you to go back into that house and pretend you know nothing. You have to be the oblivious mother for just a little longer." I picked up the card. The edges were sharp against my fingertips. I looked at the name of the special agent printed in bold black letters. I realized then that I was no longer just fighting for my dignity or my house. I was an undercover operative in a war zone, and the enemy was sleeping down the hall. "I will do it," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "If I leave now, he might run, or he might hurt someone else. I will go back." Marisol nodded, her expression grim. "Be careful. Eleanor, he is cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind." I left the diner, clutching the federal agent's card inside my pocket like a talisman. The sun was shining outside, but the world felt grey. I was going home to a son who had already sold me to pay his debts, and I had to smile and ask him what he wanted for dinner. The game had changed. It was life or death now. I became a ghost in my own life. It was the hardest role I ever had to play, per Marisol's instructions. I started to fade. I would leave my glasses in the refrigerator. I would ask Marcus the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. I let my hands tremble when I poured tea, spilling hot water on the counter while he watched with that cold, predatory patience. It worked. I saw his shoulders relax. He thought the problem was solving itself. He wasted no time. 2 days later, a private doctor visited the house. Marcus stood behind the man's chair, his face a mask of concern, nodding solemnly as he fed lies into my medical record. She wanders at night. Doctor, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. She forgets where she is. Last week. She almost fell down the stairs because she thought it was the bathroom door. I am terrified she is going to have a terrible accident. I sat there, clutching a tissue, and nodded vacantly. Inside, I was screaming. He was building the narrative for the police report. Elderly woman with dementia, tragically confused, fell down the basement stairs. It was a perfect script. But when the door closed and I was alone in my room, I stopped shaking. I locked the door and lay on the floor. I did the breathing exercises Ruth had taught me. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. I did leg lifts. I squeezed a rubber stress ball until my forearms burned. I told myself, you are not frail. You are not confused. You will not die easy. The clock was ticking louder now, late one Tuesday night. The voices drifted through the vents again. Naomi sounded shrill, panicked. I cannot do another month in this suburb's hellhole. Marcus, she snapped. You said the liquidity problem was solved. When are we listing the house? Keep your voice down, Marcus hissed. Just give me 2 weeks, maybe less. The paperwork is almost ready. And then nature takes its course. Once the payout hits, we are on a plane to Saint-Tropez. Just wait. 2 weeks. I had 14 days, maybe fewer, before he decided to push nature along. He started testing me the very next day. He found me in the hallway and gestured toward the open basement door. The smell of bleach was gone, replaced by the hum of the ventilation system. Mom, he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. I want to show you the new air filtration system I installed downstairs. It is amazing. It really helps with the dust. Come take a look. He wanted to see if I would walk into the trap willingly. He wanted to see how fast I could move on those stairs. I gripped the banister, feigning a look of terror. Oh, Marcus, those stairs are so steep. My knees. I feel dizzy just looking down there. Can we not? He studied me for a long moment, looking for a crack in my performance. Then he shrugged. Fine. Maybe another time. The next morning, I met Marisol in the park 3 blocks away. She handed me a grey medical alert bracelet. It looked like the standard rubber kind you buy at a pharmacy, but the underside held a tiny, high-fidelity microphone. The FBI tech rigged this, Marisol whispered, fastening it around my wrist. It has a 12-hour battery loop. It uploads to a cloud server whenever you are near your phone. You have to get him to talk. Eleanor, we need him to admit to the plan on tape. I touched the cold rubber. It felt like a shackle, but I knew it was a lifeline. That evening, Marcus came home with a thick leather folder. He poured me a glass of wine, acting the part of the dutiful son. I have been thinking, Mom, he said, sliding the papers across the coffee table. We should get your estate in order. Just in case something happens. I drafted a will that leaves the house and your savings to me. It keeps things simple for the courts. You know how messy probate can be. I put on my reading glasses, pretending to struggle with the text. I sniffled, wiping away a fake tear. Oh, Marcus, You are so thoughtful to worry about these things. Of course. I want you to have everything. I signed it. But I had already taken photos of the drafts he left in his study earlier. When I sent those images to Marisol, she called me back within the hour, her voice shaking with excitement. Eleanor, she said, he made a mistake. He is rushing. In his search for your assets. He missed something. Your late husband. He bought shares in a diversified energy fund 30 years ago. He never told you they compounded. Eleanor, that account is worth nearly $400,000. Marcus thinks you are destitute, but you have resources he does not know about. If this goes to trial, that money will pay for the best prosecution team in the state. I hung up the phone and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at the old woman staring back. For months, I had seen a victim. I had seen a woman waiting to be discarded. But tonight, the eyes in the mirror were different. They were dry. They were sharp. They were the eyes of a woman who was done hiding. I touched the glass, tracing the reflection of my own face. You think I will die in the dark down there? I whispered to the empty house, my voice steady as stone. No, I am going to drag you into the light. Marcus. And if I have to go down into the darkness to get you, I will take you with me. The meeting room at the federal building was cold, smelling of stale coffee and aggressive air conditioning. Special Agent Harris Cole sat across from me. He was a man in his 50s, with greying temples and the kind of tired eyes that had seen everything people do to one another in the dark. Marisol and Caleb sat on either side of me like bodyguards, but I knew that when I went back to that house, I would be alone. Mrs. Harrow, Agent Cole said, leaning forward with his hands clasped on the table. We have the financial data. We have the fraud flags. But to put him away for life, to make sure he never hurts anyone again, we need an overt act. We need him to attempt the crime. I felt the blood drain from my face. You mean, you want me to let him try to kill me? We will be watching every second, Cole promised, his voice low and steady. But yes, for the charges to stick, he has to believe he is succeeding. We need you to stay in the house. We need you to be the bait. Marisol squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I did not pull away. I looked at the document in front of me. It was a consent form for Operation Basement Light. My name was listed at the top under the classification Threatened Target. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake this time. I was past fear. I was in a place of cold resolve. I signed my name. The next morning, a utility van pulled up to the house. A man in blue coveralls came to the door, claiming there was a report of a voltage irregularity in the neighborhood. Marcus, annoyed and distracted by his collapsing finances, let him in. The technician was one of Cole's men. In 20 minutes, he had planted micro cameras under the lip of the basement staircase and above the steel door. 2 days later, we gathered in a surveillance van parked 3 streets away to watch the feed. The image on the screen was grainy, appearing in black and white, but it was clear enough to break my heart all over again. On the screen, Marcus was struggling down the stairs with heavy bags. Pause it there, Caleb said, pointing at the monitor. He zoomed in on the labels. Quick lime, high-strength concrete mix. And those jugs, that is industrial solvent. He is not building a server room. Eleanor. He is building a tomb. Caleb then pulled up a file on his laptop. He had managed to mirror Marcus's hard drive while the technician was inside. I found a file named Blizzard Blackout. It is a script, essentially. He is tracking a storm front coming in from the Rockies. His plan is to cut the main power breaker, creating a blackout. Then he turns on the backup generator in the basement. But he has rigged the exhaust to vent back into the house, specifically into the stairwell. Carbon monoxide. He waits for you to check on him, or he calls you down. You get dizzy. You fall. The fall kills you, or the gas does. To the police. It looks like a tragic equipment malfunction during a storm. I felt sick. It was so calculated, so scientific. We have neutralized the gas threat, Agent Cole said quickly, seeing my panic. Our technician disabled the seal on the exhaust valve during the inspection. If he turns that generator on, it will vent safely outside. He will not know until it is too late. You will be safe from the gas. We turned back to the screen. Marcus was down in the basement again. He was laying out thick plastic sheeting, taping it to the walls with meticulous care. He smoothed out a wrinkle in the plastic with a gentle hand, the same hand that used to hold mine when we crossed the street. He stepped back, admiring his work, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. It was the face of a man who felt no guilt, only the thrill of a problem being solved. Agent Cole turned to me. His face was grim. Based on the weather reports and his prep work, he is not waiting for the end of the month. Cole said, "The storm hits tomorrow night. He is going to move then. You need to be ready. Eleanor, go home. Lock your door. Wait for the signal. It is not going to be long now." I looked at the screen one last time, at the plastic-wrapped room waiting for a body. "I am ready," I said. And God help me. I was. The blizzard slammed into the house like a physical blow, rattling the heavy glass panes of the living room windows. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of the roast beef Marcus had prepared. It was a lavish meal, too large for 2 people, and the normalcy of it made my stomach turn. Marcus poured me a glass of expensive red wine, his hand steady, his smile tight and practiced. "Here, Mum," he said, sliding the glass toward me. "Drink up. It will help you sleep through the storm. You know, I have been thinking, I am really lucky to still have you here. Not everyone gets this much time with their parents." I took the glass, my fingers gripping the stem to hide a tremor. "Thank you, Marcus." That is a sweet thing to say. Naomi had left an hour earlier, claiming she had to meet friends in the city before the roads closed. We both knew it was a lie. She was fleeing the scene of the crime before it happened. Marcus kept checking his watch. He tapped the screen of his phone, monitoring the weather app with obsessive focus. "The grid is taking a hit," he muttered, more to himself than to me. He looked up, his eyes flat. "If the power goes out, do not panic. The emergency lights will kick in. And Mom, whatever you do not go down to the basement. I have the generator rigged, but it is temperamental. I do not want you near the machinery." I went to my room at 10 o'clock, but I did not undress. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, clutching the burner phone Marisol had given me. It buzzed against my palm. It was a text from Harris. "Alpha team is in position down the street. The blizzard is scrambling our signal. We have a 10-second lag on the video feed. That means a blind spot. Be careful. 10 seconds. In a house this quiet, 10 seconds was enough time to die." I waited. The wind screamed outside, masking the small sounds within the walls. Then, at exactly 1:45 in the morning, the hum of the refrigerator died. The digital clock on my nightstand went black. The power was gone. A moment later, the faint, ghostly green glow of the emergency track lighting flickered on in the hallway. I heard his door open. I crept to my doorway and peered through the crack. Marcus was moving down the hall. He was no longer the businessman in the cashmere sweater. He was wearing dark coveralls and heavy rubber gloves. A surgical mask covered the lower half of his face, and a headlamp was strapped to his forehead, casting a sharp, dancing beam of light through the gloom. He stopped at the linen closet. He opened it and pulled. I watched him bend his knees, his hands gripping the handle of a long, metallic box. Every muscle in his back strained under the dark fabric as he dragged the heavy thing inch by inch across the tiles. The sound of metal grinding against stone shrieked so loud I felt my throat go dry. I stood frozen, my fingernails digging into the cold plaster of the wall. For the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that if I blinked, the next time I opened my eyes, I would be inside that box. As he turned the box to maneuver it toward the basement stairs, the lid shifted. A strip of black tape peeled back. Inside, illuminated by the stray beam of his headlamp, I saw the glint of heavy steel chains. I saw a roll of thick plastic tarp and a bag of quick-drying cement. It was not storage. It was a disposal kit. He reached the top of the stairs. He paused, looking back toward my room, his eyes dark hollows above the mask. I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the wall, praying the shadows were deep enough. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I looked down at the glowing screen, shielding the light with my hand. "We are approaching. Do not let him take you downstairs. Stall him, whatever the cost. Stay in the hallway view." Marcus turned back and shoved the box through the open basement door. I heard the heavy thud as he began to lower it down the steps. I did not run away. I walked softly into the living room and sat in the large armchair facing the hallway. I arranged my robe. I slowed my breathing. I pretended I had just woken up from a nap. I sat there in the green gloom, waiting for my son to come back upstairs and invite me to my death. Marcus reappeared in the living room doorway, pulling the surgical mask down to his chin. He was sweating, his eyes darting around the room with a manic energy. He forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "Mom," he said, breathless. "The generator is sputtering. The exhaust fan is acting up. I need you to come down. Just sit on the steps. I need a second pair of eyes to tell me if it smells like smoke while I adjust the intake valve. If I pass out, I need you to call 911. It was a clumsy lie, but the intent behind it was sharp as a razor. He was checking my reaction, gauging if the prey was docile enough to walk into the slaughterhouse on its own. I gripped the armrest of the chair. "Oh, Marcus," I said, wincing and rubbing my knee. "My arthritis is flaring up with this storm. It hurts to walk. Just give me a moment to put on my heavy coat. It is so cold." I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the table, while his back was turned to check the window. I slid my phone from my pocket. I swiped the screen to the video camera, hit record, and propped it against a vase on the TV stand, the lens facing the center of the room. Marcus turned back, impatience radiating off him in waves. He stepped toward me, his hand outstretched. "We do not have time for coats. Mum, come on. I will help you." He reached for my arm. I did not flinch. I looked him dead in the eye and spoke the words I had been holding in my throat for weeks. Have you calculated how many bags of cement it will take to cover me completely, Marcus? Or are you just guessing? He froze. His hand stopped inches from my elbow. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he had been struck by lightning. What he whispered. Then he let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Mom, what are you talking about? You are watching too many of those crime shows again. Cement. You are losing it. I found the receipts, I said, my voice steady and cold. I saw the emails about the living collateral. I saw the life insurance policy for $5 million. I found the forgery kit in your desk. And I have the recording of you telling Naomi that I am just a burden waiting to be liquidated. The confusion on his face vanished, replaced by something dark and ugly. The mask fell away. He stood taller, his shoulders squaring. He looked at me not as his mother, but as a problem that had suddenly become defiant. You do not understand, he said, his voice dropping to a hiss. You have no idea what pressure I am under. The investors are circling. If I do not get that capital infusion by next week, Northbridge collapses. Everything goes. The house, the cars, my reputation. I built this from nothing. And you have just been sitting here, taking up space. So the plan was what I asked. Stepping back to ensure the phone caught his profile. A power outage, a carbon monoxide leak. I get dizzy. I fall down the stairs. And then you bury me under the floor before the coroner arrives. It was supposed to be painless. He shouted, stepping closer, his hands balling into fists. You are 72 years old. Mum, you have lived your life. What are you doing with it anyway? Sitting in a chair, watching TV? You are just burning oxygen. I am your mother, I said softly. You are a liability. He screamed, spit flying from his lips. Do you know how many people lose their jobs if my company fails? 100 people? My survival saves them. Your death saves the company. It is simple math. You should be proud. You are finally useful for something. I am just shortening a few years of meaningless aging so I can have a future. He lunged. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my flesh with bruising force. You are coming downstairs. He snarled, dragging me toward the hallway. Now. No, I screamed, digging my heels into the carpet. Get down there, crash. The front door exploded inward with a deafening boom. Splinters of wood flew across the foyer. FBI federal agents dropped to your knees. Now red laser sights cut through the gloom, dancing across Marcus's chest. Agent Harris Cole stormed through the wreckage of the door, his weapon raised, flanked by 3 men in tactical gear. Marcus let go of me as if I were made of fire. He stumbled back, throwing his hands up, his face a portrait of absolute terror. I was helping her. She fell. I was catching her. Then, movement on the stairs caught everyone's attention. Naomi came running down from the 2nd floor, clutching a silver suitcase, her face pale and streaked with tears. She saw the agents and froze on the bottom step. Naomi glass hands, where I can see them. Harris barked. Harris walked over and yanked the suitcase from her grip. He unzipped it. Inside were stacks of cash and 2 passports. Going somewhere. Harris asked. We have your chat logs. Naomi, we know you set up the buyer for the data server. We know you pushed him to expedite the asset liquidation. Marcus looked at Naomi, then at the agents. Desperation twisted his face. He pointed a shaking finger at his girlfriend. It was her. It was all her idea. She made me do it. She said we needed the money. I tried to stop her. Harris looked at Marcus with pure disgust. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. My voice came through the speaker, clear and undeniable, from the recording on my wristband moments ago. You should be proud. You are finally useful for something. I am just shortening a few years of meaningless aging so I can have a future. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. He looked at me. I stood by the fireplace, rubbing my bruised wrist. I did not look away. It is over. Marcus, I said. He collapsed to his knees, not in prayer, but in the total, crushing weight of his own ruin. The trial took place 3 months later in a federal courthouse that felt colder than any winter storm. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing a drab orange jumpsuit instead of his Italian wool suits. Naomi was seated nearby, weeping into a handkerchief as the charges of conspiracy and money laundering were read against her. The room was packed with reporters. The press had dubbed it the basement air case. When the prosecutor played the audio from my wristband, the courtroom went silent. My voice, shaky but clear, filled the space. Then came the video of Marcus dragging that metal box across the floor. The jury did not look at him with pity. They looked at him with horror. His lawyer tried the old tricks. He stood up and adjusted his tie, saying, "Objection. Mrs. Harrow is confused. She has a history of misinterpreting innocent household events due to her age." But Marisol was ready. The forensic team brought in the physical evidence. They showed the receipts for the industrial solvent and the quicklime. They displayed the blueprints for the ventilation sabotage. You cannot argue with math, and you cannot argue with a receipt for a body bag signed by the defendant. The narrative of the senile mother crumbled under the weight of his own paper trail. When I took the stand, I did not cry. I looked straight at the jury. I spent 72 years on this earth, I told them. I worked double shifts to buy him his first computer. I held his hand when he was afraid of the dark. And he tried to put me in the dark forever just to balance a spreadsheet. It was not just murder. It was a business transaction. He looked at his mother and saw a liquidated asset. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of early parole. When the gavel came down, it sounded like a steel door slamming shut. Marcus turned to look at me. I think he expected me to be weeping, to be the broken mother reaching out for him. Instead, he met the gaze of the woman who survived him. I held his stare until the bailiffs led him out in cuffs. Northbridge Quant Systems was dissolved, and its assets were seized. In a twist of irony that would be funny if it were not so tragic, the court awarded a portion of the recovered funds to the victims as restitution. I was listed as victim number 1. The money he was going to kill me to get came to me specifically because he tried. Marisol came to my apartment a week later with a proposal. "Eleanor," she said, setting down her briefcase, "you are not the only one. Since your story hit the news, my office has been flooded with calls. Seniors who are scared, who are signing papers they do not understand. We should use the restitution money. Let us start a foundation. We called it the Basement Light Project. It is a non-profit designed to provide legal aid and emergency housing for the elderly facing financial abuse by family members. Yesterday, I went back to the house one last time. It had been seized by the state and was being prepared for auction. The police had ordered the illegal construction in the basement to be demolished and filled in for safety. I stood at the top of the stairs and listened to the contractors pouring wet concrete into the hole where the kill room used to be. I watched the grey sludge cover the floor, burying the memory of the plastic sheets and the chemicals. It felt like they were burying the old Eleanor too, the one who was too afraid to speak. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. It was Ruth. "Ellie," she said, her voice bright. "The first support group meeting tonight. We are at capacity. We have 20 women coming. They saw you on the news. They said if you could do it, maybe they can too. Tonight, I am standing on the balcony of my new apartment. It is a small place, but it is mine. The keys are in my pocket, and no one else has a copy. I look out over the city lights, thousands of windows glowing in the dark. I know that behind some of those curtains, there are secrets. Not every box dragged into a basement holds a body. But from now on, if someone like me sees their child dragging a heavy weight in the dark and feels that cold shiver of dread, they will know they are not crazy. They will know they are not alone. And now, finally, they will have a number to call. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was not easy to relive, but I hope it opens some eyes to the reality of what can happen behind closed doors. I would love to hear from you in the comments, so please let me know where you are tuning in from and what you think about the ending. If you want to support more stories like this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button so this video can reach the people who really need to hear it. Stay safe out there.